if you look at it, it's this word AI also is like quite mythical sometimes. It's a superset, a sort of encompasses, whether you engineer your data, whether you're taking, business decisions based on certain data points, and how are you using AI in day-to-day in your organization. Now, coming back to point that how do you make an organization AI ready?
What I believe right now is that AI awareness should start from the board level and come down to everybody in the organization. So at least fundamentally, we need to make sure that that happens. Everybody needs to be aware of AI, the capabilities to some extent. That's a starting point.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Decision Points. Today, we're talking about how to get organizations ready for AI. Getting organizations ready for AI is on the top of the corporate agenda for boards and senior managements. And how to get there, we're going to find out with two experts. And joining me today are Moumita, Sarker, partner data and analytics with Deloitte India, and Darshan Gunawardena, who is Director Engineering AI and Data for Deloitte Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
I'm going to start with you, Moumita. What does it mean to be AI ready? And what are the core elements, required for such readiness for organizations today?
Yeah, Imran, actually, if you look at it, it's this word AI also is like quite mythical sometimes. It's a superset, a sort of encompasses, whether you engineer your data, whether you're taking, business decisions based on certain data points, and how are you using AI in day-to-day in your organization. Now, coming back to point that how do you make an organization AI ready? That itself has many elements to it. Now, I think I'll talk about 6 important topics, right? One, and this is all the experience over now 21 years, been doing this for a living. Now, first and foremost, can't stress more on the fact that how should you build a strong data foundation. Without a strong data foundation, it's difficult to productionize most of the AI cases. So organizations first have to look at that. Second, I think even if you do a fantastic AI use case and get all of us pumped up about that AI use case, you need a top buy-in. You need to get that organization to recognize and be able to, back up those AI use cases. And that comes with the third point of even if your top management and the mid-layer are all ready to get these 5 use cases into production, you need a bandwagon of people to be able to absorb it. So AI literacy is a critical element of that. And then fourth, I think there is a capability building. A lot of you need in-house, you need to build some people who will have the skill set to deliver those. You cannot go on having use cases and continuously borrow from an ecosystem. You need to build a bit of your own ecosystem of capability. And the last one, I would say, there's 2 of them, I think comes to my mind is like, there are series of choices which organizations need to make. Maybe we'll talk more about each of these. 3 kinds of choices. It's all about that actually. It's choices of the right use cases. When to take up what to do with AI, what not to do with AI. I think it's a $1 million question today. Tech choices. Should we go with this platform? Should we go with this cloud? There's no one answer there. It's based on use cases. Build versus buy, the other kind of choices. So if organizations are thinking even on those lines and getting some elements built in, then you are getting ready for AI, if I would say. And the last one is continuous measurement of success. If you can't show, and the biggest, I would say, abuse that has been done over time is that, AI is some magical box where something is getting cooked up and something will come out of it. But that doesn't happen. You need to continuously show quick wins and a measurement of success. So we'll talk about more as we go along maybe. on these 6 themes. So maybe I'll start with those 6 themes and we can talk about more.
Thank you so much. I think it's very, very important, those 6 core themes, and we're going to delve into each, most of them as we go along. Just going to start off with one of those core themes, Darshan. Moumita mentioned about the importance of a data foundation on which you build a whole AI strategy. How important is this, and how do you get started with building a really good data foundation?
Sure, Imran. So they say data is the new oil. Absolutely. Right. And obviously, from what we know, to build robust AI, we need good data, right? So let's just maybe take a simple example, right? So I mean, as we all know, the holy grail of marketing is to market to that one individual, right? To make sure that you have customized marketing to appeal to a particular person. So how do we do that? Now, for us to do something like that, we need to understand the customer better, right? So if you take a simple example, and this is something that we all sort of understand also, it's a simple use case of a bank wanting to promote, let's say, either a credit card or a particular product to an individual, right? How do they do that? So that means they have to understand the customer better to be able to market a particular product to that customer, right? How does one get to that point that they understand the customer well enough to market to that person? So if you look at it, we have our data in the bank already. Some of it is in the core banking application. So we have our customer information. We have information about, let's say, the savings accounts, the current accounts, and if you have pawned something, that information is there. And also there's a very rich set of data that is coming from our credit card transactions. So now effectively there's 2 sets of data here, right? You have the customer data, which is what we call master data. That's a very descriptive set of data which describes the customer. So it'll have my age, my occupation, so many attributes like that, right? And then we have the transaction data. So that will, for example, have how often do I, let's say, withdraw money? When does my salary come in? How much is my salary? And then beyond that, we also have the transaction data coming in from the credit card transactions that we do. Now, if we can bring all of this data together in one place, right, and connect it up, we get a good understanding of the behavior of this particular customer. We know his age group, we know his occupation, and we also get a sense of, okay, look, what is he doing, right? Is he spending on, let's say, going to a restaurant? Is he spending on groceries? We get a sense of, how he behaves, right? So now, once we get all of that data together, on top of that, we can build a lot of AI models to segment the customer and also do analysis as well. But the critical point is, for us to be able to do that, is we need fundamentally, we need to know that, let's say, I as Darshan Gunawardena is in this system, and let's say in the credit card system, we tie that up as one person, right? And that's often called the golden record. So we have one record saying, okay, look, this is Darshan, right? And then we have the ability to tie up all his different transactions, his credit card transactions, his transactions on the savings account, to that single person, right? So then, as you can see, we have that complete view of that individual. Now, to get to that, it's a lot of hard work. And that's where the real struggle is. So, for example, if you look at AI, building AI and all of that, about 80% of the work goes into the data engineering aspect of it, where we bring all that data together, we sort of clean it and all of that, right? And one of the fundamental problems that we see is that, if you look at, a bank or another institution, they would have gone through multiple co-application changes. The quality of the data is also not good, right? So for example, if you take banking again, at some point, maybe they didn't capture, let's say, the identity card number. Maybe it was not a mandatory requirement. But now that becomes very important when we want to tie up and say, okay, look, this record is for Darshan, and have that one record where we are able to say, okay, look, this is Darshan and this is all the information we know. So what I'm trying to impress upon here is the importance of having that foundation. And that foundation is built on bringing as much data into one place, and then ensuring that we have the connections between the data sets, between, let's say, the descriptive data and the transaction data together, right? And quite simply put, we have the proper data governance to ensure that we have quality data to be able to build up the AI models that we need.
But I'm just going to maybe Darshan on that point, that, sometimes it for AI use cases that is there in the world outside now, especially with the advent of Gen AI, let's not say advent, but there is a change which is happening from, like, say, maybe 3 years before. This approach of our structured is very critical, and in fact we still have to do this entire work which just Darshan mentioned for cases which need to go for production. But to the audience, I think it's important, and it's an important thing to note that there are use cases which may not require you to wait for or getting all your data to one place. There are some use cases, I'm not saying that all, but some. Like, for example, if you want your sales teams to be equipped with data points, it is so simple data points sometimes. What should I do today in the morning? Which order to take, which order to not. There can be small data silos which can be created, like islands of data, if I would say, which can be created and could be nimbly addressed. And now with Gen AI, they can converse. The problem is that, we wait for a structured data because, your inability, or sometimes, the hindrances of people who are actually on the field to do their work, they don't have to go through the filtration of data and go through this entire. So now you have a conversational tool. You can enable conversations, which we are seeing, right? So Darshan, in that sense, we literally can do some use cases right on the fly, even if your data is all in different shapes. I think that flexibility is amazing now.
It is indeed, because I know I'm talking to a lot of CIOs. The biggest problem is the issue of how reliable that data foundation is. And as a frustrated bank customer, I can tell you it can be quite frustrating when you the different departments.
Everybody calling you.
Exactly, and so I think in the long run, critical to have this foundation. But it's very heartening to know that you at least some parts of maybe a bank, for example, can get going without waiting for the rest to follow. Moumita, I want to touch upon another of the core points that you made, and this is about a fact that is actually quite relevant to many transformations. That is the requirement to get top-level buy-in. How important is this for making an organization ready for AI, and what can you what advice can you give based on your extensive experience dealing with corporates all over the world?
So there are two things which I think, let me talk about some failure points, if I may. So it's important that the top management has to see, you're talking about something which is more new kid on the block.
Of course.
For many places, many organizations. Some organizations are mature. But irrespective of the maturity levels of the organization, a top management or the C-suite and the next level needs to touch and feel it. So the most important element that I've seen working like magic for top level buy-in is whatever AI use case you're doing, have a view for the top management. We sometimes take a lot of pride as practitioners to be in a lab and keep it in a lab. That's like a deadly thing, right? So once you have that, that's number one. Number two, you cannot involve them at the last leg or in the middle. It's like literally criminal, right? You need to get that top management to be along with you on the journey at the beginning, at the mid checkpoint, and be getting their buy-ins at various milestones. And the third important thing, which is very critical, is investments. Now, we cannot shy away from the fact that some of our some of the fail-fast experiments that we have to do. AI doesn't happen like a magic. It needs to be trained. You need to have patience. So one thing which I think as to the audience, I think it makes a lot of sense to set expectations as per use case to the top management of the level of patience that is required, and continuously update them that this is the use case, this is the output, this is going to be the step-by-step outputs that you will see, this is the iteration involved. So preempt them early, right? And otherwise it's very easy to say that, okay, this does not work. So when you do that for once, then gradually the investments will keep on flowing. A kitty or a capital required for innovation will not come on day one.
Yes.
That kitty will come when you have one or two things on the table, right?
Absolutely. It's a journey.
It's a journey, absolutely. So I think that's the 2 or 3 things which really has made or broken certain elements in this journey for people. Good, successful ones which I've seen have gone through the journey, have made this nimble approach of taking their top management along, and it's been a fruitful one.
Excellent. Darshan, another of the core points that Moumita mentioned for getting organizations ready, and she used this word, AI literacy.
Yeah.
But also, I think wider skills beyond this awareness and how to use it is I think, a very core part of getting organizations ready. Now, AI literacy is required even at the board level, as we are talking about the importance of top management buy-in, because I'm aware many boards really are not aware of the potential. Young, lower, middle level management maybe. So different skills are required by different parts of the organization. How do we bring that together, and how do we equip organizations to do that?
Sure. So what I believe right now is that AI awareness should start from the board level and come down to everybody in the organization, right? So at least fundamentally, we need to make sure that that happens. Everybody needs to be aware of AI, the capabilities to some extent. That's a starting point, right? And they should know that, okay, look, what's happening. And right now, what I see happening is with generative AI coming in, everybody's talking about AI. I mean, everybody wants to understand what it is. And also what it has done is everybody's getting used to, going into a particular tool and typing something and getting an output, right? And that also in some ways has diluted the whole concept of AI, and I see a lot of confusion as well, and some of the more interesting conversations we've had is everybody wants to simply sort of, have a ChatGPT interface where they can
they've done AI. They've done AI.
They've done AI, or they put a prompt and they want to get, data from their ERP system or their core applications, and that's what they want to do, right?
They want a toy to display, but not really integrate AI into their lives.
Exactly that, and the fact that it can simply do all of this by simply typing something in, right? So this goes back to the earlier point that we were discussing, that see, even for you, I mean, that's possible, but for you to do that, you still have to go back and build that data foundation, because the semantic understanding of the data needs to be established. Right. Yeah. So without doing that, you can't basically go in and type a prompt and get a response. So now how does that work, right? Because see, if at the board level and the C-suite level, there is no sort of nuanced understanding of the capabilities, what's going to happen is the guys below, right? Your head of IT or your CIO is going to get pressured into, hey, look, I want this. Right. But then to get to a particular outcome, as Moumita was saying earlier, there's a particular journey. You have to get your fundamentals right. And that takes time. Right. It's not something you can do quickly. So one, it obviously needs to start from awareness across the board. Right. And that also helps in painting a more realistic picture of, what is required, what would the timelines be, and also the other aspect around, how do you make it trustworthy, and how do we actually do responsible AI? Yeah. Right. So for that, that awareness is required, and the whole aspect around responsible AI is very important right now, right? So because, if you take most of these Gen AI tools, right, people put their personal information, they put some of their private information,
company information,
and now it has got so simple. You can just simply take a picture of your account balance and upload it, and you can get it to do various things, right? So that responsible part also becomes very important, right? So how do we do this? It's at least fundamentally, everybody needs to be aware of certain critical things. Second, right? So then we have to look at, okay, look, how do we sort of build or buy, or how do we, then you need to make sure that you also enable the IT teams to better understand, what is required. How do we sort of start small and scale up? And I believe those will be some of the things that Moumita will be discussing is, see, your IT teams need to be more nimble, right? And they need to be able to understand what is happening, right? Because now the speed of innovation is quite fast. I mean, I come from an era where, for example, if you wanted a new machine, you have to sort of, order it and it'll take 6 months for the machine to come, right? But now, with going to cloud, all of that has changed, right? You want to, scale up and have more hardware. It's just you go and, flick a bunch of switches. Yeah. And you have that. And a lot of the models, AI models that are required also are there, right? So to fine tune it and put it together, you need that deep technical expertise, right? So it's very important for organizations to make sure that their employees are skilled. And it's an ongoing process. It's not that, you can send them for a training and say, okay, look, we've gone for training, we are okay. It's not like that. It's an ongoing process, and you also have to enable them by providing sandboxes and environments and the data for them to try these out, right? So we talked about the board level and the C-suite, but there's another set of users as well. If you look at the various departments, right, you have the functional users. So you have your HR department, you have your finance department, so on. They need to be educated as well, so that they will understand the capabilities, right? They will also go and challenge, for example, the IT team and say, hey, look, I'm doing this repetitive task, or I'm scanning this document every day. I have to extract the data. Then, I do a very basic test set of tasks, but I feel that AI can solve this problem for me.
Yeah.
Right? And that becomes critical as well. So, I mean, we talk of organizations where you have HR, finance, marketing, so on, but it's not just that, right? So, for example, if you take a doctor, right, if he understands the capabilities of AI, I mean, it doesn't mean that he needs to be able to build these systems, but if he can make that connection and say, hey, look, I have this problem, this is going on, maybe this is a problem that AI can solve. If he at least thinks of that, he can go reach out to the technical guys and get that built. So I think fundamentally what I'm saying is awareness is important, and then you have various levels of knowledge that you need to acquire along with skill that's going to help people in this journey.
Moumita, success in any journey, any endeavor, any project is about the choices you make. And getting your organization ready for AI is also about making the right choices.
Multiple.
Exactly. So what sort of choices are organizations faced with? And from your experience, what are the right choices to make?
Yeah, good that we are in decision points, right? So that's like, choices is false in line. Yeah. So I think very, very critical question. And I'm one of the favorites when we talk to many experienced, mature organizations, as well as organizations which are starting the journey, right? The choice sets are different. Now, if I just broaden that picture a bit and say that what kind of choices are we talking about in the AI space? Number one choice, I think, is the very, very critical, is the choice of the use cases to take up. See, at the end of the day, it is resource cost. Leave aside money cost, leave aside the actual investment, but it is people's time.
Yes.
And leadership's focus. So it's not necessary, and I'm seeing it across, and it's a maybe a state of affair at this point, that that organization is scrambling around and saying that let's do 20 POCs because we need to do a checkbox. It's not at all a good utilization of time. Take help. I mean to say, it's good that, if there are organizations which have some governance structure to say, now this use case, whether it calls for AI, whether it calls for Gen AI, that distinction and taking cue from the fact that when Darshan mentioned awareness, it's even the demarcation of what is AI, and you need to know only that. There is an interesting framework which is useful sometimes, called this choice framework of use cases, that I've been talking to a lot of people about. Is if you have a use case, which is complex in scale. I mean to say, suppose you need to reach out to 400 branches, right, at once. The process is an automation process. Say you're doing a loan sanctioning or you're giving credit cards. So you're just doing 2 application scorecard. But you need to scale it up to n number of branches. It requires a computer vision because it requires the form to be scanned, and there is a potential that you can save 3 days of man hours of all time and give a better customer experience. The customer is wowed by the fact that in 3 hours, you've been able to revert that you are eligible. Now, this wow factor is so important because later on that wow factor becomes that the customer doesn't go to somebody else, makes choices that this is a digitally forward bank. This is an important impact side of the choice, right? That what does it impact? Second, is it complex? If it is not complex, you don't need like huge machines and AI to solve it. If it was a problem that was going to only go to one stakeholder, one function, and it solves only a particular problem, then you may want to look at that whether it can be solved by a smaller AI or an ML application and a point solution. It's very important to understand the complexity and the scalability impact that scale will bring. That's 2 by 2. And if you want to join in with the fact that there are many point solutions which do not have data, this is the other dimension. You might want to use Gen AI to say that in a fraud detection case or an anomaly detection case, there are not enough anomalies to study from. Can I now use AI to generate such cases to be able to solve, because the problem is very important. So in this case, you have a very 3-dimensional framework. I would strongly recommend organizations to scan through, even if not govern, every use case that is coming to the limelight to be invested in, to go through this. You can always have innovations going through. For example, if you want to have conversations of the salespeople translated into enabled by AI, is it super critical? Is it something which will scale and give you a lot of man-hour saving? Important questions. And it differs from company to company, and insurance might require it very much because their agents are not their own sometimes. It's all contracted. Or maybe a smaller, if you have only 40 salespeople who are owned by you, you may not want AI to do it. You have one-on-one connections, right? So these are different to different people. So first one is a use case choices. And the second one, I think Darshan will maybe we want to talk about it a little bit more about the tech choices. It's important, and maybe we will not have one shop fitting everything. You might have to make more choices there. Darshan, you want to talk about anything around the tech choices which the companies are making?
Sure, Moumita. So when you look at the tech choices, right? So now what has happened is, if you look at the whole tech landscape, possibly about maybe 5-6 years back, right? So AI was something that you did outside of your core applications, right? So you would, take the data out of those systems, bring it into either your on-premise data center or to the cloud, onto one of the hyperscalers, and then you would build your AI on top of that because you needed a lot of compute power to do that, right? But now what has happened is if you look at the applications across the board, right? AI has been embedded in your ERPs, in your CRMs, and there is a lot of customizations and the ability for people to tweak and use those AIs, right? So that aspect has come in. So then it becomes a question, okay, look, do I actually need to go and sort of take my data out and build it, right? Second part of this is, okay, if you actually do need to take it out, right? And then you go down the path of, okay, look, do I put it onto an on-premise setup, or do I go into, let's say, a hyperscaler such as, let's say, Google or AWS or Microsoft? See, fundamentally, that decision will be driven maybe by regulation, right? Because there may be certain regulations that prevents you from using certain cloud environments.
Particularly hosted outside the country.
Exactly, hosted outside of the country. Because, see, right now, at least, if you look at the 3 hyperscalers, they still don't have a data center in Sri Lanka, right? And then this question, exactly, right? And then this whole question of data sovereignty and with what is going on across the globe, right? The sanctioning possibilities and all of that sort of comes up as well, right? And that becomes an important factor in sort of deciding, that probably is one of the key areas that will drive the decision. So in areas where there is no regulation and you're able to go to the cloud, and it gets simpler as well, right? Because if you can go to the cloud, it's very easy to scale up on the compute part. And that is the most important aspect of it. And the second part of it is that if you look at like the 3 hyperscalers, right? They have a lot of models that are available. And it sort of enables you to start up your, let's say, your proof of concept, or if you have an idea, right? A lot of the models are available, right? It's just a matter of, in certain cases, feeding in the right data. Maybe it's a set of images that you need to feed in, train the model, and then you can get going very quickly, right? So what we see right now is that it may not be just one platform that you go to. It may be a mix of platforms that you work with, a mix of technologies that you work with to realize your aspirations, right? And that would also depend on certain affinities that you have as an organization. Maybe, for example, let's say your applications, right? They may already be in a particular platform, right? And obviously in that sort of situation, it would be easy for you to sort of build your AI infrastructure on that platform itself, right? There might be certain situations where there is a cost implication with, going with that particular platform, right? So there will be several key factors, right, that contribute to your decision in terms of which technology or which platform that you go to. But right now, the good thing is there's a plethora of technologies, and I think with Gen AI coming about, you have open source models and all of that coming out as well. So you have the infrastructure aspect, but then from a models and the large language models aspect, you have a lot of choices that you can make, and you can go to a best fit model that works for you, and also you have the option of possibly starting small, getting that confidence and scaling up as well.
Correct.
Right. So right now, I think we have like a very rich set of options that's available to us.
The more options that we need.
Yes,
exactly. And that sort of enables us to make very, very, fine decisions, as opposed to, let's say, using an axe. We can now use a scalpel and make more refined, fine decisions and go with the best fit approach. And I think that's like a really good place to be right now. What do you think?
And actually you don't need to make you need to make a choice as per the use case, and that flexibility that is there in the system now, it's okay to be multimodal, right? Multimodal or multi-cloud, you can go depending. Say if there is something which you feel is better with certain kinds of models with images and videos, then you will choose that. And I think this entire use case driven approach is like not today, it's been millennial, right? I mean, we have to go by that approach. Just that every choice that we make should be to the end outcome. If that some tech choice is better for an video analytics or something which will involve a lot of images, you better go with it. And there is no thing like, I'm married to this particular platform, right? So I think that's cognizant in terms, but there are cost decisions. When you have picked up, and coming back to the choice framework that I was saying on the use cases which you really feel now are getting into, when I'm saying org ready, the org should not think afterthought that I think this use case is going to blow up in like 400. You already have thought that through. So which comes to the next choice. There are 2 important other choice factors. I think very important is the choice of having a build versus buy question. When I'm saying build versus buy generically, there are certain use cases which actually have been solved. So you can actually better borrow and better take the expertise and scale it up using capabilities of the organization. Some which are, and I'm very happy with the current state, at least in the financial services. I was in fact talking yesterday that some of the core processes in finance is getting touched by AI. It's very heartening to see, because that is where maximum efficiencies are coming in. So if you're looking at a credit, underwriting, these are like core processes, earlier untouched, and there was a lot of manual checks. So you cannot take away a human out of it. You have to enable them. So there you have to make some choices about whether it's been solved earlier, or but they are so core, you might want to build it up. Because if it's a big bank and you already have that so part of your innate core, you might want to build it. So third choices apart from tech is whether you should, which use case is good to go with a niche, which we need to build it. So which is an important choice as well. So I think these kind of choices will frame how, and the more mature the organization in the thought process of this planning, people have to step back. And I'm seeing, because of this entire what you call the hype, I think hype is good for us, right? As
Indeed.
Practitioners,
Indeed.
I think the hype is good.
Indeed.
So I think we need to also take, organizations have to step back and take that cognizant steps of the awareness around what to do, what are the choices we are making.
Choices, a lot of choices to be made. We've covered a lot of material, but I think the most important question from, say, maybe a board perspective, or even an investor perspective, is measurement. Where are we on this journey? Where is the organization on its journey to be ready for AI? What are the sort of ROIs on the investments we have made? What more do we have to make? Measurements. How does an organization go about it?
Yeah, very, very, very important topic. I think it's not just, especially AI, fundamentally, because it's intangible sometimes, right? And there are two fundamental things which cause this to be a little bit of grayish in the measurement zone. One, and that therefore I'll come to the point and how, from experience, what's happening there. The fact is that there is some parts of AI which is influencing efficiency, right? So and some which are direct. So important thing is that when you start a use case, and I've seen organizations not do it so often, is that you have a use case charter, right? In the use case charter, if you're having like a AI use case saying that, okay, I want to, even the smallest one, say, I want to take all your documents and we want to summarize the documents. In a finance function, I want to look at, we are doing a lot of these cases where we're looking at finance as a vertical or any vertical and looking at all documentations and making SOPs and all of that more conversation friendly and easy to get onboarded. In such a case, it's about efficiency. Now, the whole point is that you need to, in the use case charter, specify very clearly that this is an efficiency driver. What does it mean? When you come to ROI of that investment, what do you mean by investment here would be cost, time. If you're doing a POC, there'll be some cost that you have to invest, and also the cost of the tech. You've got that all sorted. Now you need to show the management and the organization that I'm going to save X amount of man hours. This, in a very in awareness form, should be indirect revenue. So what you're saying here is that measurement can be of two kinds. If I would be a little more theoretical here, is there's an indirect way of measuring it and there's a direct way of measuring it. So if it is anything related to direct to customer, or you're saying, for example, banks do next best products. They're all AI use cases where you will do run to multiple things to come to multiple recommendation engines that are getting run at the back end to give this. This is direct impact, because you're going to get each customer to buy something that they have not bought before. Whether it's bank or FMCG or retail companies, you're going to buy, increase the range of the person, increase the relationship value of the person. So in that case, your measurement should be direct, which means that you'll have to say, you take a control, you take a target, your typical measurement framework, and do a delta on revenue that you're going to generate or estimated to generate. Beginning only, you're putting in the across and not at the fag end. The second one is indirect. where you're having efficiencies of man-hour saving, cost savings, which otherwise if you plow it in, you will get a visibility game of revenue. So these indirects, you need to convert that man hours and have a conversation with the people concerned who are you showing the impact of the organization, that there is a conversion ratio to an indirect revenue, it would be indirect to move to a direct. At the end of the day, if you're saying so many man hours savings, these man hours will go into a more value driven work, and that value could be at n number of things which will translate into value. Example, if you're looking at a trade promotion, your trade promotion cost that you are saving is directly going to get plowed in marketing, and because you're putting it into visibility and putting it on a shop floor, you're going to get more customers, and that translates into direct. So that's how you need to convert direct to direct. So if you have those in, then at the end of the day, suppose you have done only 5 use cases. There's a very simple maths saying that 2 are indirect and 3 are direct, then you are actually summing it up and saying a total incremental revenue, and you have your top line of the month, and you can look at what did AI contribute. Now, it sounds very simple when I say it on a paper. It requires a lot of, I would say, discipline. It requires discipline to and rigor to say that, every time I do a use case, I'm not going to jump it. I'm going to make sure I don't do a use case unless there is a sign off on the KPI. There's a sign off on what I measure on, what I'm going to put my value in, and then we then calculate, and then it becomes it's a mathematical thing. I think that's if we more or less we get there. I think it's a good one. Darshan, if you may have to add anything on that.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I think you covered a lot there, Moumita, right? And what I also feel is, we start on certain use cases, right? And they may not be successful as well, and that's a flip side of it, right? But I think it's not, we shouldn't get discouraged, right? And we should look at taking the learnings and all of that, and look at, again, maybe going back and understand where it didn't work, maybe understand why it didn't work, and see whether we can sort of utilize that investment, both in terms of time, in effort. And see, the thing is this, you go down that journey, you would have learned something.
Yeah.
Right? And see, there is an ROI on the investment on that fact as well. The fact that you committed resources, committed time, and they've learned something out of it. So I believe that also is
some indirect
ROI on that investment. Right. So I think it's important not to get discouraged also, right? And to make sure that you fail fast, go back and build up, right?
And self-correct at the right time. I think it's very difficult to go straight, and when you know that it's going haywire, to continue on the path and then end up saying, okay, and then actually blame the whole world of AI for it. So we get that blame quite often.
We've had a wonderful conversation. So I'd like to actually thank you both, Moumita and Darshan. It's been a wonderful chat, and I hope organizations are now, have a lot of information about how to make themselves ready for AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.